welcome everybody this morning here. Opening day of the D2C ERA annual conference here at the beautiful Wynn Hotel. I'm Peter Marinello. I direct the Electronic Retailing Self-Regulation Program, the preeminent self-regulatory forum in the direct response world. Now, before I begin, Chris Reinmuth is Chris in there? Chris, can you stand up for 1 second, please? All of you, I'm sure, have met Chris Reinmuth. If you haven't, he is the new president of ERA. As this association gets bigger, stronger, more robust over the years, this will be the gentleman we're all going to want to thank. So, Chris, thank you for all the work. Thank you. And let me tell you, do we have a good panel for you guys? It's unbelievable that this is actually one of the first panels. It is such a fantastic panel here. And I'm going to start by telling you how privileged I am that I was asked to moderate this panel of some of the most brilliant legal minds in the advertising and consumer protection world. They're going to kind of discuss with us this morning how to navigate that ever-expanding frontier of federal and state regulation. And you know what the beauty of all this is? I don't even need to brag about these guys. You know them, you've heard from them, you've worked with so many of them through the years that you already know how good they all are. And I know a lot of times that moderators preface the panel by saying, this man needs no introduction. Well, I'm not going to do that, because these guys, all the reputable work that they've done for this industry, they both deserve and warrant the proper introduction, so I'm going to do it for you. Let's see. Far end, that handsome gentleman over there is Mark Roth. Now, Mark is a partner over at Manatt, Phillips & Phelps. Did I say that? Is it Phelps & Phillips, Manatt?
Interchangeable.
Very good. He works with businesses of all sizes in all industries to comply with state and federal rules governing policy, social media, sweepstakes, telemarketing, advertising. Counsels clients on transactional matters, guides them through federal and state investigations. Previously Chief Compliance Officer at Time Warner and an FTC staff attorney, very importantly. Mark draws upon decades of consumer advertising and marketing law experience when it comes to counseling clients. To Mark's left is the new chair of the ERA's Government Affairs Committee, Bill Knowlton. Bill is a partner, the Utah Office of Invictus Law, working as corporate counsel to a multinational advertising and real estate business. Bill devotes a majority of his practice to corporate governance, federal and state regulatory compliance, government relations, employment law, commercial real estate. He does it all, intellectual property, all aspects of dispute resolution, really. He chairs the firm's Ethics and Professional Committee, member of the hiring committee of the firm, and this is what I like. He's a fervent advocate of third-party self-regulation. Speaking of a fervent advocate of third-party regulation, Jeff Knowles to my immediate right, partner at Venable, LLP. Everybody knows Jeff. He manages the government division at the firm, leads the advertising, marketing, and new business practice group. He's founded and served as general counsel here for ERA for 13 years, past chairman of the ERA, past chair of the association's Government Affairs Committee. Jeff represents clients before FTC, FDA, U.S. Postal Service, state AGs, Consumer Product Safety Commission. Also, as I said, big self-regulatory guy, appears before me at IRSP, appears before Andrea Levine at NAD, focuses law enforcement, federal, state, and regulatory matters, also handles, I like this, media relations and crisis management. Last but not least, of course, Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes. Now, in 2013, the Honorable Sean Reyes was appointed by Governor Gary Herbert as the 21st Attorney General in the Beehive State, the great state of Utah. 21 being a very lucky number, General Reyes, in this town.
So good.
So now, General Reyes reorganized, reinvigorated his office internally, and recaptured the trust of the state with striking leadership, innovative programs, historic wins against drug dealers, human traffickers, child predators, white-collar criminals. After winning the state AG election in 2014 by one of the largest margins nationwide, General Reyes was selected in 2015 by the Republican National Committee. As one of its 4 rising stars, he currently leads law enforcement training to empower other countries in combating sexual and labor trafficking, child pornography, counterfeiting, cyber crimes, and really holds leadership positions in national bipartisan organizations of his fellow AGs. General Reyes, we are honored to have you with us this morning. As a matter of fact, gentlemen, we're honored to have all of you here this morning with us. General Reyes, Bill Knowlton and I, this past July, attended the conference of Western Attorney Generals out in beautiful Sun Valley, Idaho. Just so many compelling issues that the state AG are coming at the state AGs, one after the other. From the regulation of dietary supplements, emerging technologies, privacy, the Indian Child Welfare Act, everything comes at you fast and furious. How in the world do you prioritize everything?
Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. Thanks for kicking us right into the questions. I thought we were going to do a little introductory stuff, but that's okay.
No.
First of all, I just have to say thank you for inviting me. And what other industry other than the direct response industry can you have a pitch guy like Peter doing the introductions? And there is a lesson in this, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to go back to some of the verbiage that he used. Brilliant, awesome, you know them. And you need to be really careful here, because while I feel that way about my colleagues, you have to make sure that your claim substantiation applies to all of the products that you're selling. And I know personally I'm neither brilliant, awesome, and I'm not sure that many of you know me. And so, Peter, I just wanted to...
That is not true. That is not puffery. I could substantiate each and every claim there, General Reyes.
I'm honored to be here. I kind of grew up in this industry, and my sister still works in this industry. I say grew up legally. I represented a number of companies with direct response components of their business, and I'm just a fan. I mean, I had like 2 things under my bed growing up. I had a lightsaber, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and this like Ron Popeil fishing little tackle box and fishing outfit. Anyway, getting into your question, and let me just highlight a few thoughts and ideas, and then I will definitely validate your claim that things come fast and furious to the state AGs, because they do. We have so many issues hitting us at the same time. We do have scarce resources, and because of that, we want to focus our scarce resources on going truly after the real bad guys. And largely my view of government, and I know I have other colleagues who share this view, not all of them, mind you, but some, that government should stay lean, should stay out of the way of business, should facilitate and foster good businesses like many of yours to be able to do what you do well and not hinder your progress, and focus those scarce resources that we have against going after truly bad actors. But we really need your help in doing so. And one of the things that I talk to industries about all of the time is the need for self-regulation. And I think you all do it very, very well here. The ERSP is a model for self-regulation. Why? Because you actually have teeth. You actually do something. You actually make sure that the members abide by the rules, and if they don't, then there are repercussions. And for us, it's not an absolute immunity, but if you're a member and you're abiding by those standards, there is a great level of comfort from the Attorney General. So I'll get into that later on if we have time to talk about self-regulation, but that's one of the things that I really, really wanted to emphasize. As a pivot for a second, your industry's been very good to support some of the initiatives that I'm passionate about. You all have been very helpful, and I do see some friends and known faces here, and your companies have supported us in our fight against worldwide human trafficking, not just on the supply chain side with labor trafficking, but in the sex trafficking side. And if you think of 20 to 40 million modern-day slaves around the world, it's really the might of the private sector that I try to harness. Again, in my model of keeping government slim, if we act as a catalyst, but call on your resources to partner with us, we can do a whole lot more than government trying to solve all sorts of problems on its own. And so again, thank you for that. Also, thank you for your support for our white-collar fraud registry. It's the first of its kind in the US. And again, we would like to empower citizens to make better decisions. Just like your consumers and customers who buy your products and services, you want to give them more information. We have highlighted in our state a quick way for people before grandma invests her life savings to be able to check and see, oh, well, this person's been convicted 3 times for offering fraud. Maybe I better not invest my whole nest egg into this can't miss investment deal that, has to be just tomorrow, but we don't want you to check any documentation because this is only for you, once in a lifetime opportunity. And that kind of thing happens every day far too much. And so thank you for that. Again, you do very, very much for our economy, and we appreciate the innovation. We appreciate the products and services that you provide to make our citizens healthier, to make our lives easier, and to improve the quality of life. Get to know your AGs who are out there. State AGs are playing more and more of a role, not just our federal regulators now, in overseeing and bringing cases against companies, and you need to get to know the different personalities, not just of those in the office, but of the offices themselves. They're structured differently. They have different emphasis and different pressures on them. As AGs, we don't want to be your customer service arm. And people ask all the time, if you could give one piece of advice, what is it? And then largely sometimes I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because you all are here, you're expending resources. Do you actually care? You're the ones who are doing it the right way. It's the people who aren't here that I'm more concerned about, but if you can take that message out to them. If you have excellent products and services, if you really take care of your customers, largely we'll leave you alone. If your claim substantiation is solid, if you're offering refunds in a healthy way, if you're careful about disclosures and upselling and all of those things, it's really when you start to cut corners and take liberties and skimp on things like fulfillment, that's where things start to go awry. So with that introduction, I have, again, some specific issues that are hot that maybe if we get a chance to talk about, we can. In an office like mine, I may have 20,000 cases going on at one time with 300 different lawyers. And the issues that come up every single day across sundry industries are replete, and I don't have time to focus on a lot of them, so I rely on my teams to educate me, and I rely on industry a lot too. So if there's one final thought in that, if there are opportunities like this for you to invite state regulators to get to know your industry better, I think it's a very healthy thing. If there are opportunities, and there are, for you to go attend conferences like the one Peter mentioned, the Conference of Western Attorneys General, or the National AGs, or the Democrat AGs, Republican AGs. They have lots of different conferences, and what we spend most of our time doing, believe it or not, is sitting down with industries and trying to get educated about what issues are coming up, and then educate them about where we're looking at hot topics, and it's a very healthy way to interact, and I think that's another thing that I'd like to leave. So I've overspent my introductory time, I believe, but again, thank you for the opportunity. I know that it's you all who give us power as state regulators, and I remind my people every single day that there is a lot, it sounds kind of Marvel Comics-like, or Spider-Man, a lot of power comes a lot of responsibility, but we understand that even just an investigation can ruin a business. And I spend a lot of my time trying to counsel my colleagues and help them understand that we need to be very careful about how we use this power, and sometimes it's keeping them from and educating them just about the industry. So again, try to reach out and find ways to interact with your AGs, and thank you.
Oh, very good. General Reyes, thank you. And I just knew you were going to have a passing reference to Spider-Man. I kind of knew that was coming.
Yeah.
He's a big Comics Con guy, so I knew that was coming. You know, General Reyes raised a very interesting point about raising the profile of the work that ERA does with the state AGs. ERA's Director of Legal Affairs, Bill McClellan, has done a great job over the past couple of years getting the ear of guys like General Reyes, General Racine, and we're still trying to kind of raise that visibility of the work that this association is doing. I'm going to throw this now at our other panel members, because we become sometimes so FTC-centric, and the commission has been so supportive of the work that we're doing, but I know you guys do a lot of work with the state AG's office. Give us an idea of how handling an inquiry at the state level is different than dealing with FTC, FDA, things like that. Jeff, can you go into that for a bit for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Peter. First off, it's not one or the other. It's not necessarily dealing with a state attorney general alone. Very often now, the state attorney generals are working with the Federal Trade Commission or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or the Department of Justice or other federal agencies. So very often there are parallel state and federal investigations going on. And sometimes sometimes there are investigations going on that are completely on separate tracks. The state attorney generals are doing their own thing, and the FTC or another federal agency is doing it, and the trains never meet. They're going on completely independently. And so it's an interesting world. I would say generally, the Federal Trade Commission probably takes more time. Their investigations take a long time to do, but once they actually decide to bring an enforcement action or try to force a company to settle, it moves very, very quickly. The FTC operates under deadlines. I would say with the state attorney generals, it depends on whether it's an individual state acting alone in an investigation or acting really as part of a multi-state group. And as General Reyes knows, the multi-state process where you get a large group, for example, there's a multi-state investigation going on right now of the hotel industry over the disclosure of resort fees. When I checked in today or yesterday or Sunday in the Wynn, there's a $29 resort fee there. And the question that the state attorney generals are looking at is whether or not resort fees are being properly disclosed. And that's an issue where both the Federal Trade Commission is looking at that. They may issue guidance this fall, but you've got, I think, 47 states in the District of Columbia conducting a multi-state investigation of 9 large hotel companies. So that's an example where you've got sort of parallel interest in that, but that multi-state process moves very, very slowly. From our experience, the multi-state process, I took Publishers Clearinghouse, for example, back around 2000 through 2 large multi-state settlements, a 24-state and a 26-state settlement. And that takes a long grinding process to deal with an executive committee of a group of states. And that's an interesting process. It's much easier to deal with an individual state. Utah's a little different because they have a consumer protection division that operates independently of the Attorney General's office. If you really get in trouble, you wind up in front of the Attorney General's office in Utah. But dealing with any single state, New York, California, Florida, is easier than dealing with a multi-state, and generally much easier to reach a resolution. From the standpoint of the direct response television industry, you'd welcome an individual state AG investigation any day of the week, unless it might be from Eric Schneiderman, the New York Attorney General, and you're in the daily fantasy sports business like FanDuel or DraftKings. But generally, it's a more streamlined process dealing with an individual state, and I would prefer that every day of the week. The FTC is tougher and operates under tighter deadlines.
Interesting. Bill, I know Invictus Law does a lot of multi-state legal work. Tell us about your thoughts when FTC versus state AG inquiries.
Oh, I echo Jeff's comments for sure. I don't think it's necessarily one or the other, and I think as marketers and as law firms, we need to approach it as if it's going to be both. It's been my experience and my client's experience that being an active participant of third-party administered self-regulation, such as ERSP, is a tremendous benefit to clients who are potentially under scrutiny from either state or federal regulators. Now, like General Reyes said, it's not a shield, and it's not necessarily going to save the day if you have, in fact, been engaged in some sort of wrongdoing. However, I have firsthand experience that it gives pause to have a discussion, to explain the business, to explain the model, to explain the processes that are in place. And in a lot of ways, that provides you a safe harbor to get out in front of it, as opposed to having a temporary restraining order and an asset freeze come down on you because you weren't actively involved in monitoring yourself and monitoring your competitors. The other benefit that my clients have seen from third-party administered self-regulation is that you can equalize the playing field. If there are competitors out there who are making claims that are patently false or that are completely unfair and you can't compete against because you're running an ethical business, you can turn them in to ERSP. ERSP conducts an investigation. It is confidential. And to the extent the company who has been violating these rules and regulations doesn't comply with ERSP, it gets wrapped up in a little nice package and sent to Lois Greisman at the Federal Trade Commission. I think both Jeff Knowles and Mark here have had experience with that, and I know Len Gordon, who's here today, has also had experience with that, and Ed Glenn, who I see here. So if I could say anything, Peter and I, and also Lee Peeler and I, have been out proselyting for the last 3 years to state regulators and local Better Business Bureaus. Get involved in third-party administered self-regulation. Become an active participant. Attend the meetings. Pay your dues. Participate in marketing reviews. It is worth its weight in gold. And you heard it from an attorney general say, you know, the government has limited resources. They want to focus on the truly bad actors. And if you are not a bad actor and you want to give more credibility to that statement, I would recommend you get involved.
Thanks, Bill. Mark, I certainly haven't forgotten about you. Any final thoughts on this subject before we change gears?
I fully embrace and agree with Bill's and Jeff's comments. There's really nothing more for me to add there. There was a different twist I wanted to kind of take on the question,
Sure.
And someone inspired by General Reyes's comments about government agencies staying lean, going after the bad actors, more self-regulation. What I'm finding right now, there are some state AGs or maybe their staff that don't embrace that position, and they're going after companies that are trying to do the right thing. And if they may have been tripped up or gotten involved with a bad player, a bad marketer, that they now are being investigated, and it takes away resources from the company, especially mom and pop companies as well, many of which are in this industry. I'm handling one case right now with the FTC that is involving a couple of states where, and maybe some of you in the room can appreciate this, my client is a campaign manager. They do not touch a consumer. They do not bill. They do not sell anything. They do anything. They kind of help organize and facilitate a business, a campaign from going forward, putting a marketer in touch with a telemarketing company, a fulfillment house, et cetera. Long story short is the FTC in a couple of states started investigating one of their clients, a marketer, for some bad acts. We were a third-party subpoena. The subpoena then turned into a larger investigation of my client as a campaign manager because they felt that they were part of the campaign. Then you'll hear this term also, the net of liability. And what's really scary about that is my client, and I do believe this, they were not aware that they were facilitating or doing anything bad. They were just doing their job. They were helping organize, or helping facilitate and coordinate. They were not even aware of bad chargebacks or things like that. Nevertheless, the FTC and a number of states are still coming down on them hard. And we're in settlement negotiations right now, and it's pretty severe. So I hope that there are other states that kind of embrace General Reyes's comments about let's educate, let's be educated about what companies are doing, what the industry is doing, and let's go after the bad actors and other companies, again, mom and pops, smaller companies that are trying to innovate and trying, frankly, to earn some money and to do some business, that they don't get swept into that net. That's kind of one of the things that I'm very kind of frustrated right now with the government approach to activities here. And I do see some states are more reasonable in that approach when they come at you at one-off. But as Jeff mentioned also, there are other states, particularly the state in which I live, they're not so tolerant. And so it's very state-specific. It depends on what their agenda is, et cetera. But to, again, echo what my colleagues have said, get in front of these issues, find out, talk to the relevant regulators in the states, and even AGs, DAs out in California. There are a number of aggressive DAs out there that act like AGs. Get to know them, try to educate them before you get your client roped into a bad scenario.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mark. Really, before we leave that issue, because it's a really good one, I'm going to ask General Reyes, in the spirit of direct response advertising, buy one, get one free. I'm going to ask you two questions, General Reyes. The first one has to do, again, with how your office deals with the FTC and other states when we do have these multi-state investigations, number one. And then following up on third-party liability. It's something near and dear to the hearts of, I know, a lot of people in this room. And I was just wondering if you think there's a concerted effort now for regulators to investigate those parts of the food chain.
Sure. Let me address the latter because I think it's true, and I'm probably not saying anything that you all aren't already aware of. Using the terminology, I think, from the FTC, looking at the whole ecosystem, there is sort of a push to make sure that everyone along the supply chain, everyone has potential liability. Why is that? Because I think from the view of regulators, at least, there are certain people who've been able to hide behind structures in the past. And so that's why you have to be careful about what you do with your merchant accounts. It's why you have to be careful about you're not involved in what could be construed as credit card factoring. Because the investigators for our offices, we are giving them the mandate to, yes, go down and look at back-end players. And I think it's a fair inquiry to look around and see, and that's something that should actually be a benefit to many of the companies in here to make sure that that potential bad business practices from associates or business partners of yours don't cast a bad or this industry in a bad light. So yes, I will validate that is an emphasis at the federal level and at the state level. And then getting back to the buy one get one free. What was the first question?
Well, this was my bonus question.
Yeah.
And there may be a negative option piece to the bonus.
Yes,
but that's a whole different issue. I was just wondering,
Touché,
when you have these multi-state investigations or you're working with the FTC, how does your office kind of coordinate that?
Maybe this is some just good inside baseball and how this works, whether it's an issue specific to this industry or other ones. We have obviously different backgrounds as AGs, different expertise. A lot of my colleagues have grown up through the ranks as prosecutors, and they have a particular mindset about how they approach things. And those are skills that I admire that I don't have, because I spent my entire career primarily doing civil corporate litigation. I did some white-collar criminal defense, and then I helped run a venture fund, buying, selling companies, and did compliance. And so, as a side note, I also emphasize to my colleagues a lot, look, even a perfect company, which doesn't exist, but even a perfect company, if there was such a thing, that tried to do 1,000% compliance and put tons of resources into it, will make a mistake once in a while. And those companies shouldn't be beat over the head for that mistake. Government should be reaching out to them to say, how are we doing it better? We understand that you made a mistake, and as long as you're forthright and come forward, you're not trying to conceal stuff from us, let's be proactive, work together, get beyond that, put structures in place to prevent those types of things in the future and move on. That's my view, because that's where I came from. I come from representing companies like you against regulators, and now I'm on the other side of the table. A lot of my colleagues don't have that same mentality, and I think after some years of prosecuting really horrible people, if you're in the line of business that we're at and you got to go after child pornographers and human traffickers, pretty soon you get into the mindset that the world is black and white. There's good actors and bad actors, and sadly, sometimes I think regulators can get jaded, especially after too much time, and start to view businesses and come what I think is a very un-American view approach, that if you're successful, you almost have cheated somehow to get there, and it's our job to go root around and figure out what you did wrong. And I think really the presumption should be, if you're successful, congratulations, that's great. We're going to trust you but verify, right? Ronald Reagan asked him, trust but verify. Let us look at it and see. And if there's nothing to hide, then God bless you, and you should be on your way. And we shouldn't be ruining your business during the investigative process. It galls me, and I'll just say it up front. And I've been very candid with my colleagues, because we have very frank discussions going back and forth, and we'll say, I don't think we want to be a part of that. I don't think that the science that you're relying on it justifies an inquiry. And what I always tell them is, look, this is great if y'all, especially the more aggressive ones, and some of them have more political aspirations than others. Some of us, I should say, because I'll include myself in that group. Some of our group may want to use this as a stepping stone for something else. And so they'll have press conferences. And what happens? The press conference about an investigation, what kind of damage does that do to a company? When the investigation's done and the company's been exonerated and nothing's there, is there a press conference to tell everybody that this was a great company? And no. If there's ever an apology or even something akin to that, it's buried, in C-27 somewhere in the back. Again, so I guess we get approached every single day by other offices saying, hey, join us in this fight, because there's a lot more power, as Peter alluded to, in having 2, 4, 10, or 20 offices going after a business or an industry than just one office. We could share resources. When it is right, and there is a truly bad actor, so let's assume it's none of you in here, somebody who's really violating the rules and maybe conducting criminal enterprise, then it is a really great tool to have. People like Carl Racine and I will gather and pool our resources so that there's not a disproportionate impact on any one office. Ours is a relatively small state. Utah's got 3-point-something million people. We only have 300 attorneys, or 250 to 300 in our office, and we can't do all of what we want to do. So, like I said, every single day, just be aware there is that risk that we're getting calls. I'm calling other AG offices on some issues that I'm passionate about, saying, please join me. And getting back to what I was saying before, where you don't want to end up is having your company's name on my desk, because I tell my people, only bring the most critical things to me, right? Otherwise, I would have just piles and piles and piles. And you can inadvertently end up on the desk for something very innocuous. I mean, just a customer client complaint that you've taken care of, 50 times before, but you forgot to on this time, or your guys weren't really diligent enough. And all of a sudden you end up on my desk. It's just an impression that I have. I may not even have time to get into it, but all of a sudden, the next time I remember your company's name, it's in the context of, oh, it's in that pile. And so to try to avoid that, do everything you can on the customer service side, because I will get a call from one of my colleagues saying, hey, we should investigate that company. And if my last impression was, yeah, you know what, they were on that pile, I've never talked to that company before. They don't have an ERA or an ERSP membership. I don't know them. I've never been on a tour of their plant. Don't know their counsel. Okay, maybe we will join. And so I think that was Bill's point. The real victory is in avoiding the CID or the investigation in the first place, and that's where you have to put your work and your emphasis on.
A really interesting perspective about success. And the successful people, there's almost a presumption that something's going on if they're successful. And it's kind of a very opposite to the entrepreneurial spirit of this group, too, because we do have so many successful marketers out there who kind of rolled up their sleeves and got their...
Don't stop innovating. Don't let that, deter you from building great businesses, but realize that there is that sentiment, unfortunately, out there. And we do work a lot with our federal counterparts at times on cases like you mentioned, Jeff, blockbuster cases. The VW case is just a good example of one that just outside of this industry, but that was federal, state, county. It was everybody in.
Okay, here's my very clumsy segue into the next issue here, because we are going to talk about self-regulation before this thing ends, just so you guys know. Just want to pass it on. But Jeff Knowles, Mark Roth, Bill Knowlton, I just want to get your thoughts here on, hey, what's riding the crest of the direct response wave? What are the issues from a legal standpoint that this audience should be keeping an eye on? Jeff, tell me.
So, Peter, I would I'll run through just a quick list of issues that I think are at the top of the enforcement checklist. Negative option marketing, free trials is a really hot area. There was a statute that was passed by Congress in 2010 called ROSCA, the Restore Online Shoppers Confidence Act. And the FTC sat on that statute for about 4 years, really doing very little. But in the last couple of years, they've really brought a number of investigations and enforcement actions against companies. And that's a statute that gives also state attorney generals the ability to bring actions as well. So the state AGs have gotten active in that area. And what they're looking at in particular is starting with the lead generation through the disclosures that are being made. Is there appropriate disclosure? Is the consumer giving their express consent? And then there's a simple cancellation method. And it sounds like a very simple statute, but it's getting a lot more complicated. We handled the very first ROSCA case, One Technologies. That was a case that the Federal Trade Commission brought. But in that case, there was also the states of Ohio and Illinois. They joined in the settlement with the FTC, but the state of Texas did a separate settlement in that case. That cost One Technologies $23.5 million to settle that case. NutriClick is another case that working on with my colleagues at Venable. That case just was filed today in federal court, the complaint. The settlement hasn't been filed. That's another case. The amount of money is a lot smaller, but for the company to go through a long investigation, that's a dietary supplement company with a good track record on that, but still having to go through a very painful investigation. And there's another very, very large investigation going on right now involving a prominent company in the direct response industry, direct response television industry, that involves upwards of close to $1 billion in revenue. So this is a very, very hot area. And on the state side, we also represent a company, Internet Order, which was marketing the Pimsleur language learning program, just a language course. It had a free trial issue. And the states of Washington and Pennsylvania sued Internet Order, and the state of New York conducted an investigation as well. So that is a top issue. Telemarketing, interactive voice recognition programs, and online website disclosure, very important for the infomercial industry, direct response. And there have been cases there, All-Star, TriStar, Product Trends, Direct Alternatives, cases where people have looked at one issue or another and singled that out. And in some of those cases, the FTC came in, and what would have made a very easy, clean settlement become much more complicated. So dealing with an individual state alone, or even a couple of states, is a much smoother path. The states will listen. It's much easier to work with. When the FTC gets involved, it's much, much tougher. But that area has led to a number of changes. Those cases that were brought have brought about a lot of positive change in that area. And I wish we could have gotten IRSP more actively involved with, for example, the New York Attorney General, educating them about what IRSP is doing, what the benefits are there as well. Operation Choke Point remains a major issue. We represent the 3 largest payment processors in the country. Again, every time a subpoena goes to a company, a particular marketer, at the same time, the Federal Trade Commission will send a subpoena to their payment processor asking about chargebacks and refunds and other issues. And so that brings in potentially collateral damage, because it can, as Chris Rymeth knows, having worked with several of the largest processors, that can put in play, in jeopardy, your payment processing, your ability to process debit cards and credit cards. And that can be a real problem. There are certain industries right now, debt relief, debt collection, other things that are under assault right now, payday lending, other areas right now. The CFPB is getting a lot more active now. They're jumping in on a whole range of issues right now. They're suing payment processors. They're suing marketers offering products that are considered financial products, products that are marketed to consumers that have business opportunity, other types of programs. So the CFPB is becoming a very active cop on the beat, sometimes working with the state attorney generals, sometimes working on their loan. Very difficult agency to work with, because unlike the FTC, they won't talk to you. You can't meet with them. Unlike the state attorney generals, you can't have a conversation. So the CFPB is a terrible place to be right now, and we're defending various litigation right now in the CFPB. The last thing I'd mention is privacy and data security. That's an area where everybody is jumping in. And again, right now, on the privacy side, there are a lot of cases right now. We're heavily involved in ad blocking and other issues as a firm representing various trade associations and coalitions. But on the data security side, the breach side, that will lead to an FTC investigation. It'll lead to a multi-state investigation. You can look at something like Experian or other companies that have had a major breach. That's a problem. But jumping into that with the FTC and the state attorney generals, the CFPB, the Federal Communications Commission, and other agencies all jumping in. And the last point as well, the district attorney's offices, for example, in California, are very, very active. And sometimes they'll team up with the state AGs and the federal government. So, for example, there's a major case investigation going on, a very large company, an ERA member right now, involving their negative option marketing. run by the district attorney's offices in California. So those are the top issues.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you for a second. It's buy one, get one free time for your friendly moderator, so I have 2 questions for you. First one, I want you to follow up. Did Jeff miss anything there? Tell us about any other issues kind of coming around the corner that we should know about. Number 1, here's my second part of the question.
I'm going to write this down because
Now,
age is, okay, yeah.
and past couple of years, you know, resulting from a lot of these AG's FTC actions, has that resonated with your clientele in terms of third-party liability? Do they understand that they're in the crosshairs? Just
Yeah. Okay, so covering number 1, Jeff did a great job of covering the major issues that the FTC is dealing with right now, the agenda, the items that they're really going after. I would add to that, and to emphasize what Jeff was saying, the online selling disclosures, very, very important for the FTC. They're holding a workshop to further explore disclosures and how effective they are. Frankly, I was looking at the agenda. At this point, I think it may be overkill. I think they've made their point. Disclosures, clear and conspicuous, unavoidable, et cetera. But nevertheless, they feel that they want to continue to bang that drum. So I get it, and it's very important, and I emphasize to my clients at all times, online disclosures can't just be behind a link under terms, for example, for an auto renewal. That's not acceptable. Automatic renewal terms or continuity as a hyperlink, click on that. Or your order comes with auto shipment as a hyperlink, click on that. That may not even save the day, but that's important stuff that the FTC is looking at, and they want to see those types of links. Other areas that kind of touch upon the DR world, social media, disclosures, big word, transparency. If you're going to have consumers, if you incentivize people, ambassadors, influencers, talk about your product, which is a huge part of campaigns right now. If you're not doing that, you should be, and your agencies will be telling you to do it. Paying people to get out there and to talk about your product and service. Why? Because consumers they don't trust advertisers anymore, they trust each other. So they're listening to each other. What do you need to do? Reach out to those people who do have influence, have thousands of followers on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and reach out to them and try to get them to use your product. But make sure that they tell them to disclose that I received this product for free, or the great folks over at XYZ company gave me their product to try, and it's terrific. You'd need to have a social media policy in place and enforce it as well. The FTC has gone on record with a number of cases, a number of public statements talking about the importance of having a social media policy, giving it to influencers and ambassadors and people you're incentivizing to talk about your product, and then monitoring. It's simply not enough to have the policy and say, I have this policy, I gave it to them, so I'm good. No, you need to have a monitoring process in place. And there's no one size fits all. It really is dependent on the campaign, the person, what channels they're in, et cetera. So that's a huge area. In addition to native advertising as well. Again, I don't know to what extent DR is really engaging in that. It's more traditional advertisers, but native advertising, I'm not going to get into the specifics right now, but it's ads that look like the native environment in which it appears. If you're on Facebook, you expect to see ads on your, looking over here, right side, and in the middle is all your friends' feeds and all that. But then ads pop up in there. Why? That's native to what you're looking for. It's looking for updates from your friends and reports and things like that. But when advertising starts slipping in there, the FTC is very sensitive to that. It's on their radar, and they want to make sure that those ads are noted as paid for, and not just seemingly that if your friends like something, that all of a sudden it shows up in their feed. Also, privacy, data security, as Jeff said, if you have a data breach, you will receive a subpoena from the FTC. As the sun will rise in the east, that will
Guaranteed.
Will show. Guaranteed. And so, obviously, you can't prevent data breaches entirely, but you need to show the FTC and the state AGs that you at least took whatever means you could to protect your data, which could be reasonable means given whatever your world is and what type of data you're holding. It's also very subjective, so you need to think about all different aspects of data security. To your second point.
That was just the first point.
That was just the first. I'll make it very quick. The second point, which is, my clients are actually now very sensitive. I've made them very, very aware of the state AGs. The FTC, it's that big cop in D.C. with the badge and the hat. There are 50 other guys with hats and badges. And actually a badge on his shirt right there. See, there's it, for example. He had to check his hat outside. Things they can wear a hat in casinos. I'm not sure if you can do that or not. I don't know. I digress. But also the attorneys general, the DAs in California, the Sonomas and all those guys. You got to watch out for them as well. So I've made my clients aware of, and they are, of the state AGs. Also going back to Attorney General's comments about he doesn't want to see your name on his desk. How do you prevent that? You handle your complaints. You treat consumers fairly. You watch. You make sure you fulfill. You make it easy for people to cancel, to give them refunds. That I always tell my clients, you've got two aspects. You got your front end and your back end. The front end is advertising, what you're out there to the public. The back end, fulfillment, chargebacks, refunds, things like that. It's really, there's so many ads out there, there's so much clutter that the front end may get lost out in the environment, but the back end, if you don't treat your customers fairly, you will end up on an AG's desk. So you got to do things right. And obviously there are some states that are more aggressive than others, and some clients choose not to sell into those states, which is their choice. But with regard to every state, you need to treat consumers fairly.
Thank you very much. Very good answer to that question, that two-pronged question, Mark. Mr. Knowlton.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
Utah, as we know, is the home to many direct response marketers out there. In fact, several companies in the room here have successfully bandied together, the coaching and mentoring industry in particular, have kind of bandied together to have this very effective self-regulatory program. You know, we just heard a lot about some of these back-end issues going on. Can self-regulation, you think, I know you're a big advocate, can it make an impact on some of the back-end stuff?
Yeah, if I'm going to put that as question number 2, I just wanted to touch on 2 points that Jeff and Mark hit. I'd like to just tell you a quick story to illustrate the reality of some of these points. General Reyes talked about the mindset of some of these government regulators who are jaded. How many of you have ever used a 2x4 in construction? Did you know that a 2x4 is not exactly 2 inches by 4 inches? Well, the district attorney of Marin County in California sued Home Depot for $100 million because they were advertising in their stores, here you can buy 2x4s. Well, they went and took a sample of some of those 2x4s, and lo and behold, they were not exactly 2 inches by 4 inches. That's the mindset of these regulators. So you may think, oh, well, yeah, it's a mistake technically, but it's not that big of a deal. $100 million is a big deal. I don't care who you are. The other point I wanted to hit on was the TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. There was a case that came up recently, and I think Venable actually might be handling this case, where a company had received informed written consent to call this consumer using automated technology on their mobile phone. Well, 6 months later, that consumer turned that phone off, and AT&T reassigned that number to someone else who didn't give consent to the company. The company called that number in good faith, thinking they had consent. Lo and behold, they didn't only have I think it was an FCC action, but they had a class action, which is also the elephant in the room we haven't hit on. Is typically these FTC and AG actions are followed up by those nice guys in the class action uniforms. So, just on that, I just wanted to leave those cheery stories for you.
Two good ones, Bill, really good.
As far as the back end and self-regulation, my eyes have been opened. I began earnestly involved in the ERA about 5 years ago when I was, lucky enough to meet Chris Rainmouth, Brandon Lewis, my partner Blair Jackson, Steve Thorne, and some others who were in the room, Ed Glenn, Linda Goldstein, who's here, and they were just pumping, self-regulation. It really can make a difference. It wasn't until I had clients who were actively involved in self-regulation on the front end and on the back end, actually actively participate, go through the compliance, get monitored actively by Peter's team, and then be able to explain that to regulators when they call up and they say, hey, we think your clients are engaged in XYZ bad activity. And I say, whoa, hold on 1 second. Did you know my client is involved with the ERSP? What's ERSP? Oh, here's the link to the Better Business Bureau's website. Would you like Peter Marinello's office number? Here it is. It's 212 . Here's his email address. You tell him Bill Knowlton told you to call on behalf of this client. They do that. They call me back, and case is closed. Or they send a letter saying, hey, would you please work on this next time? Thanks. So I am telling you from firsthand experience, and this hasn't just happened once. This has happened on multiple occasions. Third-party administered self-regulation with teeth does work, and it works very effectively. And people are going to call me the self-regulation guy, and that's fine, but I will beat this drum till the cows come home because it works. You've had General Reyes reaffirm that. I've spoken to Jeff Knowles on many occasions about this very topic, and he's a firm believer in it as well. So yes, to answer your question, yes, it absolutely can make a difference. But again, you have to abide by it, and you have to commit, and that involves writing a check and opening up your business practices to scrutiny.
Self-regulation with teeth, Bill, and I'm more than happy to share that term, the self-regulation guy, with you if you care to do that, because I am the self-regulation guy. Okay, you know what? We're running a little late on time. I want to open up for questions in the crowd. This is your big opportunity. Fantastic panel here. Anyone have any questions for this brilliant group? General Reyes, brilliant. Not all at once. Okay, good. Because it gives me more time to talk about self-regulation. Gentlemen, I'd like to, we have a couple of minutes left here. Give me a couple of minutes. How do we raise the visibility, Jeff, of self-regulation amongst the state attorney generals?
Well, let me just make one point. You asked the question earlier about even expanding the program further, and I think the coaching and mentoring area is the great example that Bill's talking about. What IRSP has done working with the responsible companies in coaching and mentoring has been phenomenal. What a great success that program's been. And so I think the challenge for IRSP and for ERA is to expand that program to cover other back-end issues and to protect marketers. And so the trick's going to be working off the success that the coaching and mentoring industry's had with the Federal Trade Commission, with the state attorney generals, and expanding that into other areas. So that's really the challenge. I am a huge proponent of industry self-regulation. I remember just one quick story, which Peter knows. When ERA adopted this program and set up IRSP, one of the first complaints that was sent out was to our client Beachbody. And John Congdon, who was co-owner of Beachbody, was on the board of, he said, so he was the first person that got a challenge to his advertising. And he said, you were recommending this program and we were challenging us? But that went fine. And that company had a great time, or had a good opportunity. I wouldn't say a great time, but they respected working with Peter and working their way through that issue. So I think most of the companies feel that working with IRSP has been a fair, balanced process, and one that I think is great for the industry.
Very good. Mark, any final thoughts?
Different turn, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just something that Bill had touched upon with the TCPA. We didn't really even talk much about this, but do not call. Typically, when the FTC puts out they did recently amendments to the FTC. They also issued a biannual report to Congress on the State of the Union, or the State of the DNC. And there are some nuggets in there that I have found with the FTC that once they put kind of statements out there, it's going to be followed by enforcement actions. So I just kind of want to make the room aware of these topics. So I apologize for the move away from self-reg, because I know you want to get back to that. But very quickly, the FTC is really seeking, from my reading of their statements and cases, to a narrowing of the existing business relationship. If you have customers who are buying from you, that's an existing business relationship and an exemption from the do not call regulations. We all know that, hopefully. However, putting aside also your internal do not call list. The FTC, however, is now questioning. It was always unqualified. If you have an existing relationship, you can call people. But now the FTC is questioning and applying a subjective test. Just because someone buys from you, do they reasonably expect to get a phone call from you if they're on the registry? If they made a one-off purchase, can they reasonably expect to get a call from you, even though they put themselves on the registry and don't expect any sales calls? So the FTC is kind of narrowing that exemption. Secondly, with respect to an inquiry EBR, they're really cutting down now on what the consumer expectation is when they give their phone number to a company online or somewhere else, and who they expect to get a call from. Unless a third party, particularly this is the lead gen space now, unless the third party is identified as to whom the call will be coming from, the FTC believes that the consumer only understands the company directly they're dealing with, the lead gen company, and not the third party. So you have to be very aware, and they've even said too that the lead has to be developed directly by the company that's going to call the consumer. And that gives me a lot of pause, because the whole lead gen industry relies on developing leads for third parties. If you have not developed the lead yourself, you have not gotten it directly from the consumer. So that gives me a little concern there. So for those of you who are in the space, who are buying leads as well, be very careful as to how the lead was developed, if your name was disclosed or not, your contractual obligations, reps and warranties, indemnities, et cetera. Very, very important. You need to be very cognizant of that. This is the type of stuff that the FTC doesn't publicize. And again, they were buried in the biennial report and the recent TSR amendments. So you have to read these things carefully to see these nuggets and to be careful going forward. Just want to put that out there as a cautionary.
Good, very good. Bill Knowlton, any final thoughts here?
My final thought is the future is very bright for this industry. I know hearing some of these stories and some of these regulations can make you want to close shop and get out of town. I firmly believe that the ERA is the best association for the direct response industry to be involved with, to get active, to recruit your friends and your competitors and your associates to come be a part of. I'm also encouraged that we have elected officials such as General Reyes who are of the entrepreneurial mind. In a year when presidential politics has really taken a nosedive, it's encouraging to have a member of the GOP shine brightly on entrepreneurs, on innovation, on marketing, and on creating the best economic environment in the world here in the United States. So the future is bright. Charge forward, do good things, and
Very
amen.
good. General Reyes, when you were in Las Vegas last month, you closed the presentation with this fantastic rap as kind of an ode to the late, great Muhammad Ali. I'm not going to ask you to reproduce that for us, but any final thoughts here for this audience?
Sure. Again, thank you for what you're doing. I will continue to advocate for good businesses like yours and good industries. I come from a background, as Bill alluded to, and I understand the issues. The one thing I ask, well, two things that I ask. One, don't burn my credibility. So I will continue to go out and try to educate my colleagues, but you have to help me, whether it's minding your own shop or getting involved in industry self-regulation, third-party administered programs like ERSP, or those things really help, because the worst thing that happens is I stand up and say, you have to give these guys a second look. You have to be more careful, and then my credibility gets burned. And so please, the other thing is to make sure that, I know you're already very supportive of lots of great nonprofits, but we really do need the private sector and the success that you've had and the wealth that you create to focus and turn back some of your energies into giving back to the community. And if you're generous with that, we can help keep, again, government slim and lean. And I've got some great projects. I've got some great initiatives that we would love help with, and we can talk about that another time. So again, continue to support on the nonprofit side. Continue to do as much good as you can do worldwide, because I know you have a worldwide influence. And then and don't burn my credibility, or I will be your worst enemy. I'll put that hat back on along with the badge. Thank you. God bless you all. Take care.
Oh, thank you. It's great. Thank you very much. Nice hand for this fantastic panel.